Hello, I'm Emily Heron, Product Specialist with Atlas Copco, and today we're going to be talking about batch sequences on the PowerFocus platform. I'll be using a PowerFocus 8 with 3.10.9 software, but what I'm covering also applies to other products on the platform, such as our IXB tools. Let's get into the software. Looking at the home screen and the web UI of the PowerFocus 8, we can find batch sequence in the middle of the top row here. Opening up this tab, we can create a batch sequence configuration. A batch sequence is a group of tightening programs running a specified number of times. Some of you may know this as a job from previous generations of Atlas Copco controllers. The PF8 can store up to 250 unique batch sequence configurations. Because of the high number of potential configurations, there are a few ways to make it easier to find the batch sequence that you need to look at. There is the option to narrow down the list by the first letter of the name, or you can use the search bar here at the top. To create a new configuration, as with our other menus, up in the top right corner there's the plus button. Clicking into this, we can see the settings for the configuration. Firstly, the name. You should always create a unique name for your configurations so you can find them again later. I recommend naming each batch sequence after the job it will be used for, so let's call this one Demo Batch Sequence. Next, down in the settings, we have the Lock Tool on Batch Sequence Complete toggle. This defaults to off in 3.10.9. However, we recommend to run a batch sequence with this set to on for better control of your process. If you leave it off, the tool will reset and run the batch again after completing the sequence without the need for another identifier to trigger the batch. Below that is Free Order, which is used for running a batch sequence with an accessory like a socket selector. If you're using a socket selector to select the tightening strategy to run based on the socket you pull, then you can use Free Order to allow the operator to perform the batches of tightenings from the batch sequence in any order instead of enforcing the sequence as listed in the configuration. Increment on NOK is used if you want to advance the batch counter with an NOK instead of retaining that position until you get an OK tightening, or surpass the number of NOKs set in the max consecutive setting here below. Leaving max consecutive NOK at 0 will give the operator an unlimited number of tries to get an OK tightening result. These two settings, however, cannot be used together. Turning on increment on NOK essentially gives the operator one try at each bolt. That is, unless you pair the increment setting with the decrement on loosening setting. Decrement on loosening has three options. Never is pretty easy, this setting never applies. Always means the batch count will always be brought back if a loosening is performed. When last tightening was okay is also pretty easy to understand, and it means that the count will only decrement on the condition that the last result was okay. Keep in mind that once a batch is completed, the decrement settings will not apply and the tool will either be locked or the batch is reset, so any loosenings would apply to the new batch. Lastly, in the settings, the sequence abort timer allows you to set an abort timer between 10 and 600 seconds. If the batch sequence is started and then not completed within this set time, the sequence is automatically aborted. Next, we have to set the programs we want to use in this batch sequence. Selecting Edit under Batch Configuration, the configuration window will open to assign the tightening programs and their batch size to create a batch sequence. Using the standard plus button in the top corner, you can add more tightening strategies to the sequence. Then assign each tightening strategy a batch size with a maximum of 250. Batch size is how many consecutive tightenings with this strategy will be performed before moving on to the next strategy in the list. Leaving batch size at 0 will give an infinite number of tightenings, and you'll need to abort that batch to reset it or select a new one. Remember that if you're not using Free Order, the batch sequence will follow this order of tightening strategies exactly. And if you're using Free Order, then you'll want to assign an identifier number here to associate this tightening strategy with a slot in your socket selector. If you're not using a socket selector, leave this set to none. Now that we have configured the batch sequence as we need, in order to use it, we'll need to go over to the virtual station and assign the batch as a task. When using a batch sequence, you'll see here on the results screen that it is showing the total number of batches within the sequence, as well as the number of tightenings for the batch that's currently running. When we start completing tightenings within the batch, the counts will start to go green and increase, so your operator can follow along if necessary. This is an overview of what a batch sequence is and how to create one. If you need more information about using an input to select a batch, this is actually done from the Sources tab, and we have another video that's going to run you through that process. I hope this video has been helpful. If you have any other questions, please reach out to your local Atlas Copco representative, and thanks for watching.